You already know what you're in for, so let's just jump right in. It's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? And it's time to ask the question, who is the iPhone XS Max for? Now, before I get started, I do want to let you know that I did a more standardized version of this review over at Pocket Now. You can see it in the card that's appearing and in the description down below via a link. So if you're looking for even more info about this phone, head over to Pocket Now as well. Also, here is your standard disclaimer. This is not an exhaustive list. If there's a user that I missed inside of this video, make sure you let that be known in the comment sections down below, and I might highlight that comment in my social media and also on the community tab here on YouTube. All right, here come the crazy comments, especially since I'm gonna start with the fact that this phone's not for Android fans. I know, duh, right? Because why would anyone want to go to iOS when you can have the customization and personality that Android provides? Besides, there are a ton of different options in the Android space where you can even get a headphone jack, more than even the dual camera setup of the iPhone, and a greater diversity of features. iOS is powerful, but it doesn't really have a total personality. It's carried more by the apps in the App Store than by many of its own merits. Android, on the other hand, provides a ton of different ways to customize and cater the daily experience to your own tastes, and no two users' experience have to even be remotely the same. Part of the reason for this is Android staples like app drawers and widgets, which break up the monotony of page after page of the icons like in iOS. But obviously, the iPhone is made for Apple fans. For one thing, the ecosystem is very self-contained and easier to manage when more parts of your digital life are made up of Apple products. The iPhone pairs best with the AirPods, iCloud syncs to all Apple products including MacBooks, AirDrop is the fastest and easiest way of transferring files that no other ecosystem has, and Apple products are simply the most supported by third parties. It's really easy to find just about any extra case or tool for the iPhone compared to any other smartphone. Another thing is that the iPhone is really easy to come back to, because even as iOS has changed over the years, it's just as familiar to past users as it can be. I'm actually a good example of this because my longest tenure with an Apple product, much less an iPhone, was the iPhone 7. And when I came back to the iPhone 10 and then this iPhone XS Max, it didn't take long for me to get used to everything again. Everything that I needed is, well, on the home screens, which may be a little bit boring, but it also makes the iPhone one of the most accessible smartphone experiences around. But also, this phone may not be made for all Apple fans. Some may not like this. I have even heard from some diehard Apple fans that even if eventually they get the new phones, the changes are hard for them to fathom and fully accept. The notch is here to stay, the headphone jack is not coming back, the iconic home button is gone, and Face ID has fully replaced Touch ID. If the sales of the iPhone X were any indication, the radical shift in design didn't convert everyone, and I wouldn't be surprised if plenty of them decided to move on. I did get the Max model of this. It's not called Plus anymore, but this big screen is made for media junkies. The move to the biggest and fullest screen possible means some great things for media lovers. This is a large screen, and once you accept that the notch is there and realize it doesn't really cut into everything, videos and movies on YouTube and Netflix get really enjoyable. The phone gets bigger as a result of this screen, but the XS Max isn't any bigger in footprint to the old Plus models. It also isn't that different in size to its main competitor, the Galaxy Note 9. It's also a high quality screen, and AMOLED means that great colors are going to come through and the resolution is plenty for great detail. iOS could do a lot more to take advantage of all of the screen real estate, but once you're in a visual app like Instagram, it becomes pretty clear. This thing is made for enjoying. But you may not be enjoying too much of the experience because this phone's not quite for audiophiles. The whole headphone jack saga is nothing new anymore because there's no headphone jack here and there wasn't for the last couple of iterations. But it's hard not to mention it on the new iPhone when the box doesn't even include an adapter for your existing wired headphones. That has to be bought separately at the Apple Store, and that's just more money out of your pocket. For the true Apple experience, you also have to shell out money for the AirPods, which themselves are not the best audio experience either. These might be minor quibbles to those who will simply get the tools needed and go, but the fact remains that other phones and devices put a lot more thought into their audio, including things like DACs and amps. Now let's get into the software and talk about how this phone is made for the worker. As I mentioned before, iOS doesn't do enough to provide full multitasking tools that do the large screens justice. Even a dual window function would have been dope here, but the App Store is a treasure trove of tools for just about any possible task. Even Apple's own apps cover a lot of bases, like iMovie and GarageBand, two apps that don't really have any true equivalents in the Android space. And unless you go too far with the folders and you install too many apps, everything you do need is right in front of you, just a few swipes away. In fact, I'm becoming kind of a fan of one full screen gesture, the quick switch, done by swiping on the bottom bar. It's fast, it's visually appealing, and it's used frequently. You may not be able to get things done all at the same time here, but make no mistake, you can do things pretty fast. Here's one that may not come off as too obvious. This one's also for the parent. This one is twofold. Our more elderly smartphone users may tend towards the iPhone because of the ease of use. We all know someone in our families that we might recommend these devices to even if we wouldn't use them ourselves. But a new tool in iOS adds to the movement of digital wellness: screen time. Parents may want to take advantage of the limiters included with the time tracker, and it tells users what apps have been used the most and for how long. My own usage is pretty evenly split among creative apps like Instagram and then video games. I guess all put together, that's a lot of hours in the day. Even though there are plenty of reports already that kids are easily bypassing screen time, at least we are trying to keep the next generation from completely getting lost in the Black Mirror. Alright, now here's one that everyone will have an opinion on. This phone is for the photographer. Apple continues to make its mark in the camera space, not necessarily because it is full-featured, but because it has really high-quality fundamentals. No, you won't be able to use the main camera app for more than automatic shooting, but if you are a serious photographer and you need finite control, there are always apps in the App Store, which is valuable. First off, the camera's really speedy. It has no shutter lag thanks to the shots being taken in the background at all times. Other phones might have a little bit of lag from button to file, or they keep the shutter open because of the low light situations. Speaking of lighting situations, Smart HDR is really working on every photo. This is going to be a point of contention for some though, because pictures tend to end up very evened out and far less contrasty than from other phones. It really does work in the shadows, evening out the entire scene so that everything is exposed correctly, but sometimes you don't want that. For most people, this is a benefit though, because average users really just want a picture that is as easy on the eyes as possible. Anyone who has a little more knowledge of what they want out of the scene can turn HDR off or use a different camera app. Now, portraits still have the occasional messed up line when trying to cut out the subject, but when it gets it right on either the rear or front cameras, there are some possibilities after the fact. New to the iPhone XS is the ability to change the depth of field via aperture values. It can be pretty aggressive at times, but when it's done right, the background blur is pleasing and already detailed photos get that extra amount of flair. Honestly, when I want to get a photo quick, I just lean on the no shutter lag part, make sure the framing is right, and then modify the photo in post, using one of the many different editing tools that are either built in or from the App Store. But another one of the reasons why I say this is a great photographer's camera is because the iPhone is one of the only phones that can take the moment lens. The thing is, it's not adapted to the XS Max just yet because the required case is still in development. That lens is going to be great for vloggers though. But for now, I use a clip-on lens to get my desired wide-angle view. Here are a few examples of videos coming out of the front-facing camera when using a wide-angle attachment. Unless you're in low light, the front-facing shooter yields some pretty good-looking video, especially if your focus is on IG stories or Snapchat. For full vlogs, you have to be aware of focus and exposure locking, you have to be aware of your framing, and your lighting situations, but videos can still come out looking pretty great. Check out the vlog that I posted using just the iPhone for more examples of this. But the main shooter really shoots some great-looking video that is highly stabilized. I was actually surprised by how smooth the footage was when I was zooming in. Stabilization didn't seem to kick in when I was zoomed in, but the footage was rock solid when I finally looked at it in the gallery. Videos from the main lens look pretty great too, with some good dynamic range and colors. Now, I tend to use slow motion a lot for shots in my vlogs, and I'm really appreciative of this phone keeping 120 frames per second as a setting. The problem with phones going to 240 outright is that flicker starts to appear, and in artificial lighting that flicker can completely ruin a shot. Really, my main gripe when it comes to video is kind of the same as in photography. Sometimes I want my shots to have more contrast. It might not fully replace your full-size camera when you want more control, or if you know how to get the video looking exactly the way you want it, but when done right, the iPhone video camera can complement vlogs with high-quality footage when it's the only camera you have. Okay, we're winding down, so let's talk about how this phone is not really made for those who want the most bang for their buck. With all the positivity that I have thrown at the iPhone, I have to admit that there are some glaring omissions in a device that costs a lot of money. Apple seems to believe that what they have included in the phone itself justifies the high price tag, but other phones bundle in good earphones, headphone jack adapters, even fast chargers, and none of those are found in the iPhone's box this year. This is kind of a fitting image for anyone that is trying to get into the Apple ecosystem for the first time. In order to get the best possible experience out of the iPhone, you have to shell out a lot of money for, at most, Mac products, or at the very least, an adapter to connect your headphones. Do you want fast charging? You'll have to pay for the brick and the new cable. Thankfully, this phone is Qi wireless charging compatible, so you don't have to get whatever Apple released for that, just use whatever you might already have. And finally, this one's going to be a bit existential, but I do think that this phone was made for me. Hear me out, I'm not trying to say that this phone is going to become my daily driver, but there is one thing I didn't expect. I think that if I only had this phone, I would be just fine. I'm an Android person through and through, but I can't really deny the ease of use that Apple has put into their iPhones, and I totally get why there are a lot of fans out there. But the other reason why this phone was kind of made for me, especially at this point in time, is because it really shakes up all of my preconceived notions about what I want out of a smartphone. I'm the Android guy, but I'm also the one who advocates for smaller phones. I'm the one who advocates for buttons on phones. And obviously, this phone kind of challenges every single one of those notions. I went for the XS Max, and even though I was not happy to spend all of that money on this device on the pre-order date, I decided to go for it because I thought that maybe I should challenge all of the ways that I believe a smartphone should be. And you know what? In every single aspect, this phone has exceeded those expectations. So you know what? I get it. I had an open mind when it came to the iPhone, and after using it for a little while, I can see why a lot of you out there are real diehards for this phone. But in any case, that should go ahead and do it for this video on who the iPhone XS Max is for. Now, I still think that if you don't really want to spend all of that money and this phone is a little bit too big for you, obviously there's the iPhone XS, and if you don't want to upgrade too far and spend all the money for the newest phones, the iPhone X is still available as well. There's also the iPhone XR, which I'm still contemplating whether or not I'm going to get, but it is an exciting device all on its own because it's trying to buck a couple of the trends made originally by the iPhone X. You can look forward to even more content, not only here, but also over at Pocket Now, where, like I said, I did a more standardized review, so you can go ahead and check that out in the description down below. But get into the comment sections, let's have a conversation. What do you think about the iPhone XS Max? And if you think I missed a particular user that this phone was made for, let that be known in the comment sections, and I might feature you on my social media. Well, from there, before I let this video get way too long, I'm gonna go ahead and call it on this one, and you can look forward to even more from me, but until then, I will remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.